Hello, I'm Meg Pokrass. Welcome to New Flash Fiction Review's first fiction reading. Tonight, for our first, we'll be presenting all of our staff editors and 3 guest editors from our past issues. We hope you've enjoyed our issues over the last 6 years. We've been publishing flash fiction since 2014, and it's been so exciting to have watched the form grow. We feel very lucky to have been there early on. And we've been very fortunate to have terrific guest editors, the best ones we could ask for. We have Robert Shapard, Josh Russell, Aimee Parkison, and Nin Andrews has also been our guest editor, but she couldn't be here with us tonight. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce our fiction editor, Al Kratz, one of our 3 fiction editors. Al Kratz lives in Indianola, Iowa. His website is alkratz.com. His stories have been in Smokelong, Pithead Chapel, Cheap Pop, and the ubiquitous Others. He had a novella in Flash on the short list at Bath in 2018 and 2019. Welcome, Al.
Thanks, Meg. I'm going to read a piece called The Outlier. Of course, I heard about it from my brother, Ben. Ben lying there on the couch, shoed feet up on the leather, reading the Philosophical Quarterly, volume 53, number 211, 2003, holding the magazine far from his face like a soloist preparing to sing God's praise, ready to testify. "What kind of junk are you reading now?" Dad asked and swatted Ben's feet off the leather. Ben let them hang there unnaturally. "I'm reading about how probable it is that we're all living in a computer simulation." "That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard," Dad said. $100, Ben said. "I can prove it more than you can disprove it." Dad looked down at Ben with contempt, and the feeling was contagious. I wanted to smack Ben's feet around a little bit, rip those muddy shoes right off his disrespectful feet, turn his Philosophical Quarterly into confetti. Of course, I told my girlfriend Tracy about it. On the merry-go-round at Greenwood Park, lying on our backs in our faded jean jackets, making ourselves right at home on the rusty iron like none of us were meant to stay clean. Up above us, the trees and the clouds and the houses across the street were dancing for us, making us feel like we'd always be free. We'd always get to do stuff like this. We'd never stop. I told her what Ben had said about the simulation, how Dad said it was the dumbest thing he'd ever heard. "Your dad's the dumb one," Tracy said. "Ben's awesome." She sat up to push us faster, and when she laid back down next to me, the trees and the clouds and the houses formed a unified blur. "I hope we are in a simulation," she said. I told her how serious Ben was about the whole thing, how he recited the premises like a scientist or a lawyer or a philosopher, how he said there were 3 possibilities. 1, humans become extinct before reaching a post-human stage with the ability to create complex simulations. 2, humans reach the post-human stage but choose not to conduct simulations. 3, humans reach post-human and create significant numbers of sophisticated computer simulations. Of course, I thought about it all the time. I watched strangers on the bus, looking for clues, but no one gave it away. No one looked the same, everyone different, but sneakily different in the same way. Just minor adjustments. Everyone walking on the bus, looking at the outside world like we were the fake ones and they were the real ones inside. I watched my friends, and the more I saw, the less real they seemed to be. I studied Dad on his recliner doing his crossword, bringing order to his world one word at a time. "What are you doing?" "Nothing," I lied to my father. "We'll do it somewhere else." I had to catch the world when it didn't know I was looking. I had to see it slip. I climbed up on the roof, hung my head over the gutter of Ben's room. He came in and sat at his computer, typing furiously while the blood rushed to my head. He yanked his sock off and began picking at his big toe. "Gross," I said out loud. Ben threw the sock at the window just below my head. Then he turned and kept typing, one foot still socked, one foot bare. Of course, Ben kept arguing with Dad. "So you think none of this is real?" "That's almost inevitable." "You know that includes you." "That's the whole point, Dad." "I know that you're real, you little shit. I had sex with your mother, and I watched them pull you from her body." Dad's eyes flickered. A power surge I knew must have been brought on by the memory of Mom. By thinking about what it all meant, these things Ben was saying. "None of it is real," Ben said. Of course, I saw it all in slow motion. My dad moving on Ben, leading him back against the wall. Dad's hand across Ben's collarbone just below his throat, not quite choking, but showing the potential. Ben's face turning red, not from the lack of air, but from being put to the test. I didn't want to see us being put to the test, but that's what we were doing. And then Dad let go. He lowered his hand to Ben's chest, held it softly to the heart. Ben relaxed against the wall, comfortable to be there as if it was a natural place to be. It's nobody's fault, Ben said, just basic probability. If infinite simulations are possible, their chance of being real outweigh the finite. The one chance that our world is the real one, that's the outlier. Dad pushed off of Ben's chest, cleared a few feet, the space between them still heavy but becoming lighter. Dad forming the 4 points of a cross across his chest. I saw this imaginary cross become as real as anything I had seen. The splintered wood and the nails hammering our father to this world, pinning him down and setting him free. Thanks. Next up, we have Audra Kerr Brown. She lives between the corn and the soybean fields of southeast Iowa. Her fiction has appeared in People Holding, Friction, Fiction Southeast, Outlook Springs, Cheap Pop, and elsewhere. Brown has been listed on Wigleaf's Top 50 Very Short Fictions list and nominated for Vestal Review's annual Vera Award. Her story, The Way of the Woods, was selected by Aimee Bender as a winner for the Best Small Fictions 2018. Audra Kerr Brown.
Thanks, Al. I'll be reading Royce is Not My Father. It was first published in Fjord's Review online and then reprinted at Flash Fiction Online. Royce is not my father. We needed groceries, so we pawned my sister's leg. Not her leg, but the prosthetic with a steel pylon tibia and detachable foam foot that once belonged to her father, Royce. Royce is also the name of the leg. The leg now hangs above compression socks, enema bulbs, and breast pumps in the medical supply aisle at Kotov's Pawn. Pawning the prosthetic was Mom's idea. She held Jersey's bucking torso while I pried the leg from her panicked grip. We then spent 2 days licking our wounds in the empty tool shed while Jersey ripped through the house like a mongoose on speed, smashing windows, punching mirrors, drilling holes in the drywall with a curtain rod. Later, she refused to look at us, pulling a curtain of black hair across her face with bruised and bloodied hands. After buying groceries, Mom handed us the leftover money we made from Royce. Not Royce the father, but Royce the prosthetic leg. The leg was all Jersey had left of her father. She didn't want to, but she took the money. I'm saving my money for bus fare to an amusement park called Sunshine Palisades. Jersey says Sunshine Palisades sounds like a place where children are turned into donkeys and forced to work in meatpacking plants. Caramel meatballs and geriatric cage fights are just some of the attractions touted in the Sunshine Palisades trifold. I keep the trifold between a picture of Moses and a list of 10 commandments in the back of Mom's Bible. The Bible's cover is furred with fungus, its pages falling out like feathers, as if it were a living, breathing thing. Mom's read the thing twice and has placed it in the bathroom with high hopes that Jersey and I will start reading it. I refuse to read it, even though honor thy father and thy mother is one of the commandments. There should be a commandment that says, thou shalt not abandon thy wife and child. I'm not a child anymore. I'm 14. 14 is old enough to know that you can't save money for Sunshine Palisades when you're spending every red penny in the foyer of Kotov's. Kotov's foyer is a gauntlet of temptation, swirling lights, smoky two-way mirrors, coin-operated games. The games are rigged so that you can never grab a $100 bill in Typhoon or pull out a stuffed mongoose with the claw of chance. And chances are the chocolates and the plastic eggs will turn to dust when their shells are cracked open. I open the Bible, pull out the Sunshine Palisades trifold, and stare at the pictures. I picture myself in the front car of the roller coaster, arms up, eyes wide with joy. Mom's green eye peers through the bathroom door, through the hole where the brass knobs had been before they were pawned, her cheek pinched in a smile. She smiles because she thinks I'm reading the Bible. I'm not reading the Bible. I'm thinking that I'll never make it to Sunshine Palisades, the place that may or may not turn children into donkeys. And I'm also thinking about Royce. Royce the father and Royce the prosthetic leg. The Royces. Royce the prosthetic leg used to lie in bed between Jersey and me like a third person, the heel resting upon the pillow as a bald head. Jersey would turn her head in her sleep to suck on Royce's foam toes. Now, without Royce to separate us, if our toes touch at night, Jersey heaves a hissing sort of sigh before pushing my foot away. We were pushed away by our fathers. Jersey's father, Royce, snapped off the television when she was 3, hobbled out the door on his one good leg, and never came back. I always thought Royce the father would come back for Royce the prosthetic leg and for Jersey. But Jersey says she doesn't care anymore about the Royces, not Royce the leg, not Royce the father. My father, who is not Royce, is someone I know nearly nothing about. Nothing but 2 shreds of information. He had copper red eyes, and he may or may not have worked at Kotov's pawn. Not nearly enough detail to stitch together a picture of the truth. Truth is, I played the coin-operated games in Kotov's foyer to catch the copper red eyes of a man who may or may not be standing behind the smoky 2-way mirrors, and who may or may not actually be my father. My father might not even work at Kotov's pawn. He might work as a supervisor in a meatpacking plant in a place that's just a bus ride away, in a town called Sunshine Palisades, a town with an amusement park name. I don't know my father's name. For all I know, his name could be Moses, but names don't matter, Mom says. Fathers don't matter. What matters is that we have food to eat and a mattress to sleep. Jersey sleeps beside me, her lips pushing in and out like a suckling child. I'm not a child. I'm 14, and 14 is old enough to know that your sister's prosthetic leg cannot be your father. Fathers are not made of steel and foam, but are living, breathing things made out of flesh, bone, and hair. Jersey's black hair covers her face like a closed curtain. The curtains were among the first things we sold to Kotov's pawn. Kotov's will buy nearly anything, even breast pumps and enema bulbs and antique Bibles with loose yellow pages. But they can't buy memories. Memories are stories which cannot be taken, stories you could tell yourself over and over again, just as easily as flipping through a trifold's glossy photos. I have no photos of my father. No memories, no stories, no name, just eyes like red coins staring back at me in the smoky 2-way mirror. 2 copper pennies worth next to nothing. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Audra. Next up is Stephen John. His writing has appeared in Pithead Chapel, Bending Genres, Spelk, Fictive Dream, Ellipsis Zine, and Best Microfiction 2019 and 2020, among others. He's won the Bath Ad Hoc Fiction a record 7 times. Stephen lives in the Cotswolds, England, and is fiction and special features editor at the New Flash Fiction Review. Stephen John.
Thanks, Al. I'm reading 3 micros. The first one is called For the Clock. I don't push open this heavy wooden door to feel the silence slip over my shoulders like a winter coat. I don't come here to see the light through coloured glass and watch the rippling blues and greens on a white cloth, or the lit metal of a symbol on a table. I haven't come here to sit on the time-slippery seats, to recall gone faces, or children dressed as shepherds, or to read wall plaques as though they're new, nor to read age-curled scraps of paper requesting time for the troubled. There's pen and paper on a string, but I have nothing to say in a note. I'm here for the clock, for the somber talk that descends from the tower like single drops of yesterday's rain. I've come to climb the ladder that ascends through the trapdoor and observe the workings, the wheels and weights, springs and sprockets, the clapper as it strikes the bell. I want the chime to hurt my ears. I want to feel the major C in my gut. I'll be here on the hour to peer through the grimy arched porthole at people within earshot, hearing nothing, taking no notice. The second one is called, how would you rate your overall experience on a scale of 1 to 5? She found scoring questionnaires difficult, and everything nowadays requested a score. The butchers, the library, even her last smear test. 5 for the young doctor and chocolate biscuits. Now the dating website wants her to rate last night. He arrived early, 5, bearded, 1, and the meal was nice, although there could have been more of it, 4. She'd have appreciated less talk of the ex-wife, 2. He paid, 5, and she couldn't remember the last time a man had put a hand up her skirt in the pub car park, 4. Sex on her kitchen worktops had been a refreshing change, 4, although he was in the spin cycle before she'd finished pre-wash, so perhaps 3. She never liked sharing her bed, 1, but he had left the toilet spotless, 4, and went early, 5. Average, 3. Average was normal. And the last one is called The Waller. That's W-A-L-L-E-R, The Waller. I pass the Waller from time to time on the high, remote faces of the fells. I hear him before I see him, the plink, plink of his tools on the lichened stones, like the call of a bird. He's mute to most, but over the years has spoken solitary weather words to me, damp or fair, nothing more. No one knows who's paid him for the long threads of wall he's restitched, embroidering the bitter landscape with his hard grey lines. I've never seen him eat or rest or wear anything to keep out the cold other than an encrusted tweed jacket, even when the wind has cut my face like a blade. Today the fells are fleeced with a crinkling of snow. I bid him a good day and observe his cragged hands knead a rock as a baker would mould his dough. The Waller nods to the thin blue sky and says it's crisp. He taps a sculpted rock into place as if reforming the granite rind. As I walk, the plink, plink fades to silence. When I turn, he's disappeared, absorbed into the stone and bones of the country. That's it.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Next up is Robert Shapard. Robert helped establish the flash fiction collection at Harry Ransom Center of the University of Texas at Austin. He's edited flash fiction anthologies for W.W. Norton, including Flash Fiction International. He's taught in Hawaii, where he co-founded Manoa and directed creative writing. His stories and articles are in Juked, Necessary Fiction, Kenyon Review, PEN America, Hobart, and World Literature Today. Robert Shapard.
No sound.
All right, now, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. I forgot to unmute myself. Okay, I've got 3 stories. First and last are about 100 words. There's a big one in the middle. It's about 1,000. I think it all comes at under 10. The first one's called Glyph. When he was a kid, he loved hieroglyphs, seeing Indiana Jones twist one, a stone temple figure the walls rumbling open. Now he was just a guy with a sputtering Ducati motorcycle, taking business classes, who fell in love with the girl and took a poetry class to be with her. He learned all glyphs, hiero or otherwise, were images which could take form in any of the senses. So her scent in bed was a glyph. Her touch was sometimes a glyph. And between her lips, when she said goodbye, though he pleaded for her not to, his name was a glyph. Okay, here's one called Lobster. Eddie said to send the lobster first class, or whatever it took to get it to Wyoming alive and reasonably happy so they could boil it to death there. He made her smile talking like that. She'd fallen in with him yesterday afternoon at the fundraiser on probably the largest private lawn on Cape Cod. He said he was crazy about her. She said, why? He said, because you're endearingly geeky. Then he offered her a job with the campaign, though it wasn't clear he had the power to do so. The party went on into the night, and at last they found a room in the gable of a house, bumping heads on the slanted ceiling, first him on top, then her, grappling in the single bed. Afterwards, Eddie dropped, more like imploded, into sleep. And she tried the same, but was fitful. She groped her way down a dark hall to a bathroom, feeling fraudulent because she pretended to know more than she really did about social media strategy. Really, she was just a humble second-year law student. Eddie had been with the presidential campaign since June. He had already passed the bar. In the morning, when she woke, because he was bumping around getting dressed. He told her, "Don't get up. It'll be so great if you can make it to Wyoming, but it's hugely important to send the lobster." He bent over the covers, but she shrank away. "You might want to rethink me," she said. "No, I will not rethink you," he said. Speaking from beneath the comforter, she said, "How do I send it? I'm maxed out on my credit card." He wrote instructions on a scrap of paper and was gone. 2 hours later, she strode into town with her weekender bag and a headache, trying to feel confident. The fisherman said, yes, he had her lobster. She watched him put it in a battered grapefruit box lined with a garbage bag and wet seaweed. "Cape Cod's best," he grinned. She understood this was going to burnish Eddie's reputation for ingenuity in filling odd requests by presidential aides. Possibly it could help earn him a place in Washington after the election. She lugged the box and her bag across the road to a dark bar where men were downing shots and had coffee and a Danish, then took the town's only taxi to the airport. On the way, the Cape seemed empty, almost haunted. It was so crowded only a few days ago. Now it was September, cool with the front coming in, winds gusting this way and that. She felt disconnected, literally because her phone was dead and she'd lost her charger. If only she could fly to Wyoming like Eddie said. Nancy Rossi had urged her to, her friend on the law review who invited her to the party because it was history and exciting. How often did a presidential campaign happen? But Nancy wasn't broke. She had money. It was easy for her. Coming over the dunes in the taxi, it became obvious. She could borrow the money, but not from Nancy. Then who? The airport terminal was a single-wide mobile home with 2 wooden steps to a passenger lounge with a small electric heater and a half-dozen people seated in plastic chairs. A man behind the ticket counter was chatting to someone in his headset. She waved to get his attention and asked if she could charge her phone. She said she needed to send a lobster. He said, "You want a ticket for Bob?" She said, "No, not Bob, a lobster. It has to go on the next flight." "Not unless you want to buy him a seat," he said. His mic distracted him for a moment. Then he said to her with a kind look, "There's no cargo space and almost no luggage space left." She followed his glance at the window, speckled with rain. to the plane outside, parked on an irregular patch of asphalt. It looked tiny, a 7-seater. I can take him in the co-pilot seat, he said, but I'll have to charge regular passenger fare. He shrugged as if to say, people do this sometimes, then listened to his headset again. That left so much to decide. Her parents would never loan her money to fly her lobster somewhere. They would want her to return to school. Auntie Lynn might back her. She was her childhood hero, a lawyer in Vermont who handled prenups, wills, trusts, divorces, all the most important things in people's lives. Now she was more like a friend, usually harried, like last summer, hair straying across her face as she talked to a volunteer out of Dunkin' Donuts to her office to witness a signing, then picked up the kids and between other clients called the geek squad to come fix a computer disaster. Meanwhile, Uncle Jack was off hiking. He thinks he's Robert Redford, she said, and that's okay. The man behind the counter announced to the passenger lounge, we'll start boarding in a few minutes. People stirred. Damn, she thought, forcing herself to be calm, looking at the lobster in his box. She couldn't help but think of him as Bob now, weighing options. 1, send Bob in the co-pilot seat to Boston to connect to Wyoming and his eventual death. 2, dump Bob because it ran against her grain to buy a seat for a lobster instead of a human being herself. And there were subsets. 2B, it was reasonable to return to law school, but she dreaded it because, as she admitted now, she wasn't the greatest student. 2C, hurry up and call Aunt Lynn to charge both her and Bob's flight all the way to Wyoming because Eddie did want to see her. She did want to be with him. She did know about social media strategy, anyway, more than a lot of people. She would have to make the argument to Auntie Lynn in one sentence. She remembered her saying the law was full of impossible choices. The man behind the counter stood and pulled on his pilot cap and jacket. She looked out the window and realized the runway was like one of those long driveways through the dunes to cottages she saw coming up the Cape from Wellfleet, almost lost in the coastal grass, rolling in the breeze this way and that. And she realized all her choices were right and how beautiful it was, how beautiful it all was. Okay, last one. Please do not smoke at the funeral. My father came home a war hero, quiet and handsome in his leather flight jacket with souvenirs, an enemy sword, a dented helmet, and a strange, complicated compass. He taught us to shoot, fish, play football until our heads banged together and went long, long. Time wasn't kind to him. His businesses, such as they were, all failed, but somehow we made it to college. He hardly talked after that, nor did we. We all lived far away. At the funeral, years later, I dreaded seeing a shriveled remnant of him in the casket. Yet when I approached, I found he was in his flight jacket, his jaunty pilot's cap, a lit cigarette in his mouth. He hasn't changed, I said. He hasn't changed one bit. My mother pulled me gently away. Thank you.
Thanks, Robert. Aimee Parkison's fiction has won the FC2 Catherine Doctorow Innovative Fiction Prize, a Christopher Isherwood Fellowship, the Kurt Vonnegut Prize from North American Review, the Starcherone Prize for Innovative Fiction, the Jack Dyer Prize from Crab Orchard Review, a North Carolina Arts Council Fellowship, a Writers at Work Fellowship, a Puffin Foundations Fellowship, and a William Randolph Hearst Creative Artists Fellowship. Parkison is a professor of fiction writing at Oklahoma State University. Aimee Parkison.
Thank you. I'm going to read two brief flash fictions. The first one is called As Petals Fall on Asphalt Roads. Sometimes there's food on the plate, but no one wants to eat it. No one wants to eat it, but when everyone is hungry, it's gone. It's gone, and there's music playing, piano music in the parlor, where everyone's stomach is rumbling, as if talking wordlessly, complaining about the food that is gone. Complaining about the food that is gone, we stare out the windows at the rain battering the Rose of Sharon as petals fall on asphalt roads. As petals fall on asphalt roads, the rain pours harder, the piano music stops, and I remember when I was a child, wondering why my mother never ate at the table, why she only ate alone when everyone else was finished, and only if there was food left on the plates, though there often wasn't. Though there often wasn't, I didn't realize why she wasn't eating, since because of her artful misdirection, I never understood food was in scarce supply in my childhood. Food was in scarce supply in my childhood, but dreams were not. On mornings when I woke, remembering the vivid pastel bakery and all the wonderful cakes I had eaten, bright cakes displayed under glass like valuable jeweled sculptures, unlike any cake I had ever seen. Unlike any cake I had ever seen, these dream cakes nourished me when I slept, not realizing I was hungry because of how delicious it was. How delicious it was, even though it wasn't real, and would make real food seem undesirable in comparison, as the dream baker in the child's mind could prepare the unconscious food to feed unrecognized hunger. Unrecognized hunger waited like a friend with the dream baker and the dream cakes as my mother entered the bakery as if nothing was wrong with the fact that I was nude and eating all the cakes. Nude and eating all the cakes, I was never so happy until she asked why I had saved none for her. Okay, this next one is called The Renovation. When she gazes back, the wall is gone. The wall where her bath towel was hanging isn't there anymore. The house the owners warned before she moved in is being remodeled, but she isn't prepared for what's happening. Completely nude, she stands shaking near the shower, her hair and body wet, in front of a group of construction workers having coffee. They're behaving as if she isn't there, as if they don't see her. She doesn't know what's worse, that they are clothed while she's naked, or that they're acting as though nothing is amiss. It isn't the former, it's the latter, she realizes. So she flutters her arms, calling to the workers, asking them to please explain to her how this could have happened. Her breasts are flapping like wings, and she's slipping on the tile. One of the workers gazes at her for a moment, lights a cigarette, and starts smoking. Another pours a cup of coffee and turns up the radio. Another removes his leather jacket and tosses it to her. The jacket hits her right shoulder and drops to the tile. Even though this is the last thing she wants, she plops down on the tile near the jacket and cries. The worker who tossed her his jacket walks sideways towards her while covering his eyes with his left hand as she slips his jacket over her wet body. "Sorry, miss," he whispers. "We didn't know you were here." Because the jacket is large enough to cover her, being the length of a little black dress, she stands shakily, clutching it. Gazing above, she sees the ceiling is gone. Birds are flying in and out of the house into a bright blue sky of dazzling light. When she finally stops gazing at the sky, the man reaches out to help her walk through the doorway without a door.
Thanks, Amy. Before I read the bio of the next reader, I feel like there's a need to add a little prefix. Meg Pokrass is an excellent writing teacher. Her workshops challenge the writer and are sure to lead the writing to new and exciting places. Meg is the founding editor of New Flash Fiction Review and co-editor of Best Microfiction Anthology Series. She's a recent winner of the Blue Light Book Award. She's published 7 collections of Flash. Recent stories have appeared or are forthcoming in Electric Literature, Wigleaf, and Washington Square Review. A new microfiction collection, Spinning to Mars, and a hybrid chapbook, Alice in Wonderland Syndrome, are forthcoming in 2020. Meg Pokrass.
Thank you so much, Al. That's very kind of you. The first story I'm going to read is from the Hong Kong Review, which is a print magazine, and it's called Fire Opal. Jill was trying on jeans in the bathroom. She'd soaked them in the tub to stretch them out overnight. But denim waists were not made for this kind of thing. The material wasn't giving. Today, fog was so thick that only a tiny bit of light filtered in through the window. Her breasts ached. She could hardly tell it was day. She was suspicious of San Francisco, with its weird weather, overbred dogs, and perfectly outfitted people. Russell came in from the puffy white air. At first she could hear him in the hall, shuffling and clearing his throat as if preparing to enter a scene. He was an amateur actor and a waiter, and now he was applying for a very boring job as a refrigerator delivery technician. Russell looked like a person you'd spot in a crowd. "How's my girl?" he said, bending down and touching her waist, kissing her lips. "Ambitious today," he whispered. She leaned against him, absorbing his heat. "I was up all night thinking this through, and I can't keep the ring," she said. He backed up. She could hear the steam radiator in the dining room sigh, the blast of warmth that made cooking in the tiny kitchen sweaty. She sometimes wondered if she'd survive feeling so hot and so cold in the same apartment for much longer. She worried that such drastic changes in temperature could harm a baby. "It's not that I don't love it," she said. "It's incredible," she said quickly, looking at her awful reflection in the mirror above the sink. Her face looked older than it did just yesterday, before he brought the ring home. She knew this kind of stress could be dangerous. "You're being a child," he said, his voice tight and old. She pulled at the ring, twisting it, trying to ease it off. It was the most beautiful Mexican fire opal she'd ever seen, even in photos. It was going to be sad, but she wanted it done. She oiled her knuckle with Vaseline, backed herself down on the toilet seat. It rushed off her finger all at once, and she held it in her hand. He placed his hands on his narrow hips, and he looked at her. He was too good looking and too crazy. Nobody would believe she'd gotten into this. He went over to the sink and splashed his face with short, jerky movements. His arms were covered with thick, dark hair. It was a thing he used to hide when they first started going out, said it made him appear simian. But recently, he acted proud of it. It was as if he believed he could get away with things now. The baby growing inside her belly was making him arrogant. "Can't you even see one step ahead?" she said. She went to him, pressing her hands underneath his shirt. He turned back and picked her up in his arms. When he carried her, she felt like a doll. Her swollen body became light again. He placed her on the living room sofa, covered her up with a blanket. He took the ring from her hand, set it gently on the bamboo coffee table. She decided it was best to enjoy the beauty of it one last time, to spend some time with the ring before he took it back to whoever he'd stolen it from. Closing her eyes, she imagined the sun on her belly. She'd never been to Mexico, so she locked her eyes on this strong little rock, a fiery beauty surrounded by 6 garnets like flecks of blood. "Who deserves it more?" he said. She felt water leaking from her eyes. It looked even better when she couldn't quite focus. There was a new way he made love to her, something she never knew she would like, but she did. She watched the colors and relaxed while he did it, taking his time. She locked her eyes to the light inside herself as much as the light inside the opal. It heated up, and the sun finally came out, deep colors swallowing the weaker colors. So the next story is called Marigold, and it was published in Brilliant Flash Fiction. Marigold. I was not occupied enough to avoid this moment in which it came down to Marigold and I taking very slow walks and looking at the sky and saying, no good can come of these big gray dogs. It was summer and everyone was busy with their husbands or their lovers or both. Me, I was being productive at home by not being at home, walking aimlessly around with Marigold, a nonagenarian, despite the ominous looking rain clouds. I was Marigold's sort of helper, but mainly she wanted me to walk around outside with her to protect her from unsavory animals. This may have had something to do with me having nothing in my life, causing me to relate to my old friend, Marigold, 95 years old, hardly able to breathe without a bellows. It was about the wheel of time spinning and landing on someone else's life, how each day and each night tasted wrong since Ed left me for a man named Edwin. Almost funny, or very funny. Canned laughter in my mind at this point. Marigold up the street with nothing but a parakeet. Marigold would understand if she could hear well enough, but she had lousy hearing, so I didn't try to explain, and only alerted her when something was a menace to her health or safety. For example, when new people with dogs moved in across the street from her, I warned her not to go outside alone, only with pepper spray or a weapon or me next to her. She laughed. She had a great sense of humor, and she sometimes cackled on for minutes, which felt like serious overkill. But it was as if her laugh switch had been turned on and there was no off switch. The haystacks of postcards she got from great-grandchildren, or at least some people who claimed to be her great-grandchildren, but were now grown up and living in exotic places, were piling up in her foyer. I wasn't her cleaning person in any formal way. She didn't pay me, but I did dust off those postcards for her, and also I offered to read them. Many of the postcards these relatives sent had no character. They were pictures of office buildings and unrecognizable beaches. They probably just sent her cards to get it over with. Hell, I thought, Marigold must be loaded, and they did not want to be left out of her will. Marigold was very alone, is what I'm saying, so it wasn't kind to confess to Marigold about what I had done, but I told her that I'd taken her amber pin, the one in the shape of 2 lovebirds. I stole it from you, you see, Marigold, I said. I told her that I needed the pin, needed 2 loving birds. Admitted how I just couldn't keep pace with the world and had started to take things from people I loved. I'm sorry, I said. She hugged me. I could feel the hollowness of her bones. She was almost gone. This isn't your fault, she said, in an invisible, high-pitched voice that only dogs and me could hear. You've always needed a rescue animal. Thank you.
Thanks, Meg.
Thanks, Al.
Before I announce our last reader, I just wanted to thank everybody for listening and for being readers and contributors to New Flash Fiction Review. Our 7th reader is Josh Russell. Josh is the King of the Animals Stories. Is forthcoming in March 2021 from Louisiana State University Press. Josh Russell.
Thanks, Al. Thanks, Meg. I'm happy to be here. I'm going to read 2 short pieces. The first is called Negative Capability. After her wife dies, cancer, brain, sudden, she watches lectures her wife recorded for her students, videos she'd never seen while Pam was alive. They're about romantic poetry, Coleridge, Shelley, et al., and the university at which her wife had been an associate professor is still using them to teach undergraduates, which at first makes her furious. But the university's shamelessness means Pam's immortal online. So whenever she worries she's forgotten her wife's voice, she can watch a lecture about George Gordon, Lord Byron, and hear Pam's voice, or at least a version of it, a version a little more formal and careful than the voice her wife used for calls to say she was on her way home from campus, and for questions regarding when the dog had last been out to pee, and for arguments about spending $10 a day on oat milk lattes. She recognizes there's a danger she'll forget that voice, her wife's true voice, if she listens too often to Pam's associate professor voice, but she can't help herself. In one video, Pam stutters while lecturing on De Quincey, and she's sure that inside the stammer she can hear her wife's true voice. Then she wonders if the tumor caused the stutter, and for a few days she can't watch that video. But then she has to hear again her wife say, De Quincey, dog hates her from in the bathroom. So she plugs in earphones and listens to her wife's voice close in her ears, close as if it had been when they lay side by side in the bed they bought with the money from the teaching award Pam won just 6 months before she died. After the De Quincey video, she listens to her talk about Keats and feels guilty for not caring about romantic poetry, about so many of the things Pam cared about. She wants to write a paper about negative capability, to get it all wrong, to receive a pity C-. She wants to go to Pam's office at the university and watch her write helpful hints in the margin in a hand elegant and lovely as her true voice. She wants to listen to her wife explain her failures, tell her how to fix her mistakes. This one's called Bone and Ants. My dog got a hold of a bone covered in fire ants. This is a metaphor for pornography. This is a metaphor for the time in high school when I read my girlfriend's sister's diary and was sure, though her 13-year-old sister's prose was so purple it was hard to translate into a coherent confession, the girlfriend had a fling while on a family vacation. This is a metaphor for teenage sexual desire. This is a metaphor for AIDS, as depicted in late 1980s health center pamphlets and posters I saw while an undergraduate at the University of Maryland. This is a metaphor for our decade 70 for unmarried. This is a metaphor for 5 of the 7 deadly sins. This is a metaphor for the time when I was 15 years old and I was caught shoplifting a paint marker from a drugstore in Wheaton Plaza. And it took my dad a long time to come and collect me because he felt it necessary first to shower and put on a tie. And a metaphor for the time my daughter was 4 years old and stole gum from a drugstore, proudly showed it to her mommy in the parking lot, and had to go back inside and confess her crime. This is a metaphor for Ronald Reagan. This is a metaphor for the internet. This is a metaphor for free market capitalism. This is a metaphor for populism and fascism. This is a metaphor for consciousness. Thank you.
Thank you so much, John. Thank you, everybody, for being here. This was so great. This was our first ever reading for New Flash Fiction Review, and thank you all for being part of my magazine. It's been an amazing thing, and our magazine. It's been an amazing thing. And thank you all. I think this has been a great reading, and take care during this strange and difficult time. And thank you so much, Al, for hosting us. And okay, well, I'm going to say goodbye. Okay.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.